So good evening, everyone. And we're starting another session of some study, continuing with Dōgen and another one of his essays from the Shobogenzo, his main work. And we're keeping on the main theme of the connection of our Zazen practice and our Buddha nature, and realizing truth of who we are. And that there is no separation between study and practice, and between practice and enlightenment. That's one of Dogen's main points, is the unity of practice and enlightenment. And that it's not so, as we read in the past few weeks, not so dependent on whether you think about it or not, or what your impression or thought of yourself is. But he's sort of describing a reality. Now, reality is the human reality of being on the path. So in the Genjo koan, that was very directly expressed, that you're on an enlightened way, whether you realize it or not. And so for most of us, it's the or not. And so there was a very strong element underneath it of faith. Faith in your own practice and your own Buddha nature, not faith in something outside of you. And so this is what we're going to continue exploring with the Bendōwa. And the essay Bendōwa, which is the endeavor of the way, or the practice of the way, or the wholehearted practice of the way, many different translations of this title. And each translation of the text brings a different nuance and a sort of different emphasis. We're going to use Kazuaki Tanahashi's translation, and he's been part of the Santa Fe Upaya and San Francisco Zen Center for decades. A Japanese sensei, teacher, and artist, and he brings a sort of artistic, a little touch to his translation. Sometimes when the words are tried to be very, very literal, you miss the feeling. And I think Tanahashi, he maintains some of the feeling of this study as a practice in itself, and it's transmitting some of that enlightened nature just in the study of it and the words themselves. Now, just as a background, Dōgen went to China after he became disillusioned with the state of Japanese Zen in the early 1200s, and met with 3 different Chinese teachers and spent 3 years there, and came back. And this was the Bendōwa was the first essay he wrote after his return from China, 3 years after his return, and 2 years after he started his first, you could say, monastery or community. It wasn't Eheji yet, the big main center that became known and the sort of the seat of Soto Zen, with Dōgen as the founder. No, this is his first kind of center, his first monastery, his first training place as a teacher. And so this is sort of his first essay that he wrote for his students and his monks. So it's kind of, I guess, good for us. It has different parts to it. Some of it is more kind of teaching, some is more sort of discursive a bit, discussing his travel a bit in China. And then there's a section where he's asking questions and answering questions. So what I plan to do with you is read a few of the sections of the teaching. And then if we get through enough, skip the sort of description stuff. And then it's longer than Gentrifon, so that's why we're not going to go line by line everything, because it really isn't all equally important. And if we have time, we'll see how it goes with the sessions. Look at some of the question and answers and think of our own question and answers. So, hope that's okay. And if you have a question with this, then, you know, any word or line we read or something in general that's even not related to this text, but related to our practice and study, it's important to ask. Because as we say, it's a study group, but really it's a practice group. We're following Dōgen's practice study. So, I don't know if all of you have it. I'm using the collection here, The Moon and the Dewdrop, my old book that I've got here with the different essays of Dōgen's from Tanahashi's. Most of them are Tanahashi's translations. And here on page 143, I'm reading on the endeavor of the way. Bendōwa. Okay, so, and so even his choice, the choice to say on the endeavor of the way and not on the practice of the way, or not the wholehearted way, because if you take just the words themselves of Bendōwa, it's the practice of the way. But on the endeavor is bringing into this a feeling of effort, that the way takes effort. And so, you know, we don't just practice it, we need to practice with effort. And this is kind of exploring the type of effort that is necessary to practice the way. Yes, meditation can lead to samadhi and peaceful calm, but to get the true realization and to not get lost as soon as you get out of meditation and to stay on the path takes a lot of effort. Endeavor, you know. Endeavor is effort with a goal in mind. So this is like what my endeavor is to practice this truly. Okay. So we're going to read the first section now. All Buddha Tathagatas who directly transmit inconceivable Dharma and actualize supreme perfect enlightenment have a wondrous way, unsurpassed and unconditioned. Okay, all Buddha Tathagatas. Okay, all. And the fact that this is in the plural means that Dōgen's talking about all beings, because, you know, all beings have Buddha, all beings are Buddha. So he's talking about all beings who are in this world and practicing. You know, Tathagata is another word for the Buddha. Directly transmit inconceivable Dharma and actualize supreme perfect enlightenment. Okay, so the amazing thing here, the description here, and it's really, really quite grand and in huge terms, is suggesting a something that we can't even think about. You know, much of Dogen's original essays, especially coming back from China, was a criticism of how wordy and intellectual the Dharma practice had become in Japan and China, with many people studying and analyzing and debating the texts, and it had become very much entangled and, you know, lost in all the discussions and all the commentaries. And that sense of realizing something in your own heart and your own mind. And that's why he says a direct transmission, directly transmission, inconceivable Dharma. Like, you can't even, there's nothing you can think about. It's just, you know, you're born, you have received direct transmission of the Dharma. So that is a really strong Zen emphasis here, that there's a direct transmission from, you know, Buddha to Buddha. And as much as you want to study and learn it, what you're going to be doing in studying and learning is the transmission that you have already directly received. You won't be able to understand this unless you have received the transmission of the perfect and inconceivable Dharma, right? So that's something that is there. Is like, we're studying this not to become something we're not, but to realize what we are. And that as part of your birthright of a sentient being, it has been directly transmitted. And it's inconceivable because as soon as we start to talk about it, it gets farther away. And that's one of the ironies that Dōgen was talking about in the Genja Koan, is that the more we sort of, you know, discuss it and try to unpack it and understand it, the farther away it seems to be, especially when we're dealing with so many mundane things in our lives. So here, if we can kind of accept that no matter how much we think we understand the Dharma and this reality we live in, just the reality itself, the world, what it means to be in a body and have a mind, is so much more than what I can think of. So much more than I can think of. And it's directly my experience. It's my experience directly transmitted. Have a wondrous way, unsurpassed and unconditioned, right? The important word here is the unconditioned aspect of it, right? The unconditioned it's actually originally a term that the Buddha used to describe the enlightened mind as the unconditioned mind. Because what is blocking that awareness is all the conditions of our personality, history, identity, and selfhood. Those are conditions, or what we call karma. You know, karma are all the actions and conditions that have led you to be who you think you are, right? And so here we're saying that it's, you know, when he says it's unconditioned and it's wondrous and it's supreme, it's really not dependent on any teaching or any type of, you know, nothing that you think you are can block that. It's unconditioned. It's the unconditioned mind. And everything we have that we identify with in terms of our gender and age and education and personality and all that, all those are conditions. We call it conditioning. That's our personal karma. And then we have collective karma, which is, you know, the religion we're in, or the kind of history we've had, or our culture, and, you know, the country and nation and all that sort of collective karma. All that is conditioning, which tends to, it's not necessary, doesn't have to do this, but we tend to identify strongly with it instead of seeing it for what it is, as like these conditions that arise and pass and arise and pass. And it's just part of this karma that I find myself here. But there's something behind all of that mask. Behind that mask is the unconditioned, is the Buddha, is the Tathagata, is the just this, you know, the supreme enlightenment of the direct transmission. And that, you know, is what they say is unconditioned. You know? So again, this is a really strong, we could say, faith statement. We've read this sort of thing in the Genja Koan, but he's starting this whole thing of the practice saying, first you got to just trust that. That's the first stage. The first thing you got to do is trust that unconditioned nature of, Buddha mind. Right? And then you can proceed. Only Buddhas transmit it to Buddhas without veering off. Self-fulfilling samadhi is its standard. Sitting upright, practicing Zen is the authentic gate to the unconfined realm of this samadhi. Okay, only Buddhas transmit it to Buddhas, okay, meaning like all sentient beings. Buddhas transmit it to Buddhas without veering off. Self-fulfilling samadhi is its standard. Okay, how do you know that that there's a sense of transmission and realization? Samadhi is a real important stage in meditation. And that's why afterwards, Dōgen says in the next sentence, that Zazen is the way we realize samadhi. Samadhi is the ease of mind and the calm abiding, the ability to be peaceful in the moment when a storm is going on. You know, it's the eye of the hurricane. It's the calm within the storm. It's the awareness that is unconditioned. That is samadhi. Conditioned mind is all the things that you're thinking. Unconditioned mind is the awareness that can see the thoughts. All your thoughts are conditioned, no matter what. Okay? They all have come up from, your past thoughts and the things you've met during your day and during your life. That's called conditioning. The unconditioned is that which can be aware of everything, of all the conditioning. Right? And that awareness, the more we ground in that, the nature of that awareness is called, samadhi. Samadhi is its standard, as Dōgen says. That's how we know that we are, awakening, we're beginning the awakening to our own kind of nature, right? Samadhi is that beginning awakening to realizing your own transmission, right? So in the beginning of our practice, we're not looking for the huge awakening here. What we're actually looking to develop is samadhi. Samadhi is to be able to have some equanimity in your moment, which is expressed through calm presence. If you can have a calm presence, even when you're feeling anxious, angry, or depressed, if you can maintain that calm presence, even with all the disturbances, samadhi is not contradicted by also having external states of mind that are difficult. Samadhi is the awareness of that from a calm and clear place. Can you stand in the middle of the storm, feel safe, and there's a storm going on, and that storm is happening in your mind? That's samadhi. It's the essential sanity of being a sentient human being. It's the basic sanity in the craziness of our own minds. That's samadhi. You can sit and observe and not identify so strongly with all the thoughts you're having. Because if we do, we're going to be lost. Because some of those thoughts are nice and some of them are terrible. Which ones are more you? The samadhi sees them all as just, conditioned mind. And it trusts something far deeper and more essential, which is the unconditioned. And that's the unsurpassable transmission of the Dharma in the form of your own awakened awareness. I know it sounds like all big words, but really it is something we can practice. It really is something we do practice. And that is, an essential beginning and point of our practice, is to be able to maintain that island of sanity when you're surrounded by a sea of raging waves of disturbing thoughts or a disturbing environment. you have to maintain that. Like if somebody's in the middle of an angry protest, they have to maintain that sanity. Otherwise they'll be caught and thrown by the waves of anger all around them. You know, if someone is experiencing hostility from someone else, if we don't maintain that samadhi, that equanimity, that sanity, and that trust in your own unconditioned mind, we will mirror the anger that is, you know, that we're receiving. So this is the antidote to dukkha in the beginning stages. And that's why it's so important to develop the samadhi, and a calm abiding, calm awareness, a calm presence. Which doesn't mean you're not feeling strong emotions, but you don't believe them. So that's why then we have instructions of how we do this. Sitting upright, practicing Zen is the authentic gate to the unconfined realm of the samadhi. Okay, so now we know why we practice Zazen meditation, right? Is to develop that awareness of, you know, that clear awareness and the sanity of samadhi. That's why we're practicing Zazen. This is the way to develop it. Although, I'm at the beginning of the second paragraph. Although this inconceivable dharma is abundant in each person, okay, it is not actualized without practice, and it is not experienced without realization. Okay, so we have three things in this sentence. This truth, the dharma, the inconceivable dharma, is abundant in each person. So that's number one. Everybody has this, has the dharma fully, you know, transmitted, and it's abundant in each person. The dharma, like you have natural wisdom inside of you. Your challenge is to access that wisdom. How do you access the truths and the wisdom and the sanity that deep inside of you, you know? But we're just so distracted by outer forms and by the delusions that we buy into, by all the conditions, that we forget the unconditioned. You know, so we first have to just truly, even just believe, have a matter of faith statement that the inconceivable dharma is abundant, it's full within each of us. That's number one. Your mind knows what it needs to know already. You have the transmission. You are a sentient being. You have the Buddha nature. That's number one, okay? And the second part of this sentence is that it's not actualized without practice. So we need to do Zazen and we need to practice in order to develop the samadhi. And that samadhi which can open up a sense of calm acceptance and, you know, seeing through the illusion of the self by simply keeping the peace while you're sitting in the, you know, really sometimes wavy ocean. It's that island of sanity. And then the third thing is, okay, so we need practice. We have the wisdom we need. We need to practice in order to actualize it, to like make it ripe in our lives. And it's not experienced without realization. So we need some insight in order to experience it. Like all of us have this, but we're not experiencing it. Like where's the wisdom and the truth that Dōgen and the Buddha and Daniel are saying that, you know, is abundant in each person. Like I don't feel like my mind is so wise and abundant dharma, inconceivable transmission within me. That seems kind of not so, it seems pretty far-fetched. We need to practice And to experience that wisdom, the practice needs to lead to realization. So this is sort of the stages of practice, is that first, we kind of accept that we do have within us what we need, even if we're not experiencing it. So it's strange to say, but even though the Buddha Dharma is dependent on your practice, and you're not trusting and believing in something outside of you, you do need, however, to trust and believe in you, in yourself. And that trust and belief in yourself needs to be strong enough to practice even when you're not experiencing anything. So that's important. You need to trust the Dharma inside you. And then we practice. We try to cultivate samadhi, as Dōgen says, is the gate to this realization. And then we need to all go pass through that gate and experience the deep realization that it's pointing to. Samadhi, the practice of samadhi, will lead us to the gate. We'll be able to pass through the gate. But after that gate, we're in the place of deep awakening and realization. Right? We can't force the realization. We can get to the gate. That's what we can do. So our practice is to take us to the gate of that, experience. We can't force the experience to happen. You can sit, you can have equanimity, you can have calm abiding, you can have peace in your heart and mind. You can see clearly the illusion and the impermanence and the dukkha of all these states of mind, right? And you cannot be caught up in them. And you can keep coming back to this sense of deep trust in the Dharma of your own nature. That's not going to necessarily open up to the realization and the experience of this unsurpassable, awakening. That's not something that we can actually make happen, because if you can make it happen, then I'd make it happen right now. It's something we need to open to. Samadhi is a process of opening. And then we open and trust. And then we wait. We wait. We keep practicing with patience. Our job is to cultivate the samadhi in zazen. And the awakening and insight. The Buddha in one of the places describes it as planting a seed. And different teachers have talked about this as well. I use this metaphor. Now what we do is we plant seeds of awakening. We plant these seeds of awakening in our practice. And then we add the water, and we add fertilizer and we put it in the right dirt. And, there's sun that comes out and helps it. So there are other supportive conditions and the weather and whatever, and we take care of it. And every day we make sure it's okay. But we cannot determine when that seed is actually going to sprout. That's not up to us. Okay, all we can do is take care of taking care, and of the conditions that support it. So we create supportive conditions in our minds for the realization of truth. But if you force it, then you're realizing an idea of truth. You're not realizing something that's going to change your life. You're realizing what's a really good idea. And that's why Dōgen is very, he points out the problem with, getting lost in some of our ideas and mistaking them for realization. People have great epiphanies, but it's a mental one, right? It's a mental realization. What Dōgen is talking about here when he talks about realization, he says that the experience of realization is an experience, right? And that experience may be a wordless one, And then after you've experienced it, there's nothing you can say about it. But your relationship to the world has deepened. It is not experienced without realization. When you release it, it fills your hand. How could it be limited to one or many? When you speak it, it fills your mouth. It is not bounded by length or width. Okay? You release it, it fills your hand. When you speak it, it fills your mouth. So meaning that the way we experience and express our deep wisdom and understanding is, you know, as different as there are moments and people. You know, this is the skillfulness of it. It comes out and we express it in the appropriate way. There's a really wonderful koan where someone asked Master Baso, it's a really wonderful koan. He says, what is enlightenment? You know, they're always asking that. What is the great way? What is enlightenment? Master Baso says, an appropriate word. An appropriate word. That's what his answer was. An appropriate statement. And you know, it kind of, you could almost feel a bit let down. An appropriate statement. That's it. But this is sort of echoed by Dōgen. It says, you know, you release it and it fills your hand. Like you're not trying to force it. You're doing the right thing at the right time. Somebody needs this, you're there. This is the word you need to say, this is the word you say. You know, there's an appropriate for what? It means doing the right thing. Doing the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is not saying anything, and that's the appropriate word. And sometimes the right thing is speaking a lot. Sometimes the right thing is speaking with seeming anger. And sometimes the right thing is being very soft. An appropriate statement. But it's all done for the sake of helping sentient beings end suffering. You know, sentient beings are numberless, I've got to save them. So we do that by using an appropriate statement. The statement might be a gesture. It might be an action. Okay. So that sense, it brings it down to a very practical approach to life. You know, what is a great way? It's an appropriate statement. Kind of, you know, takes the mystery out of it. Takes the mystery, but brings in the care. And care is not mysterious. It's like, you know, what do you need? All Buddhas continuously abide in it, but do not leave traces of consciousness in their illumination. Sentient beings continuously move about in it, but illumination is not manifest in their consciousness. Okay, here we have the two sides again, where he says, all Buddhas continuously abide in it. All Buddhas are in this perfect realization, but do not leave traces of consciousness in their illumination. Meaning it doesn't become self-conscious. They're not acting in a way that they act in the appropriate way, but they're not thinking afterwards, you know, I was doing an enlightened thing. They don't leave traces in their consciousness of it. Meaning you're not thinking that, oh, this is enlightened. It's not self-conscious. It doesn't become part of your identity. It just is, you know, a natural expression of the care you have, right? And then he says, sentient beings continuously move about in it, like we. But illumination is not manifest in their consciousness. Yeah. So we're in the midst of the same Buddha realm and transmission that Buddhas are. Okay. But we are not, it's not manifest in it's not, you know, filling my consciousness so that I am knowing what is an appropriate thing. Intuitively, I know the right thing to do. So we're all in the same reality. This is what Dōgen is saying. We're all in the same reality. We're in a Buddha land where the transmission has been directly given. But we haven't practiced enough in order to manifest that in my experience. So this is what the practice is, so that my mind can be in accordance with reality, not separate from it. Dōgen is describing reality as a place of Buddha, a place of awakening. If we walk through the world and that's how we view our world, it's more likely that our consciousness will start to adapt to that reality. But if I look around at the world and I see it as something I need to get out of, it's a samsara that I need to escape into nirvana, using Buddhist terms, then I'm not going to invite that into my consciousness. I think one of the things he's mentioning here, and one of the things he's suggesting, is a sense of non-resistance. Non-resistance. Right? And that kind of is another way of describing samadhi. I'm talking a lot about samadhi tonight because this is the central part of zazen for Dōgen that helps us realize this nature of who we are in the world we live in. And surrendering or not resisting things as they are is a way of opening to the mind of samadhi. But this sense of constant judgment, resistance, and defensiveness, we can see how that expresses a very different state of mind than the samadhi, the sense of being able to be centered and peaceful in your own heart, irrespective of the changing conditions. So one more short passage for this section. And as we see with this section of the Bendōwa, what we're getting is sort of the big view. We're getting the big view here. And I think Dōgen is opening both the Genjo koan and Bendōwa by giving us a big view of our own place in this world. Because most of us back then during Dōgen's time, but also now during our time especially, see ourselves in a sort of a small way, in a small place. Or we have a sense of our own self greatness, but that's just taking the self and making it like more important than others. But what Dōgen is expressing here is the greatness of reality and our lives in it as part of that reality. And I think it's a rare message that the world we live in, the reality, no matter how difficult the conditions are and how upsetting people behave and how much abuse and violence there is, and even just sadness and selfishness and greed and environmental degradation, all of it, racism, you name it, just make a whole list, a litany of complaints. And they all are real, and the suffering is real, and the dukkha is extreme. Those are conditions, and those conditions change. What we miss in all of the conditions, we get lost in them. And we think by working with the conditions, I'll be able to change the conditions. But Dōgen is reminding us that first, you have to realize the unconditioned state of mind and of this Buddha reality. And from that place, you will find the strength and the peace to be able to deal with all the difficult conditions. But if you don't first stabilize yourself on that island of sanity, then the conditions will blow you over. This is the emphasis in the beginning of the Bendōwa, the endeavor of the way. I won't find the energy and the effort to be able to go on the way if at first I don't, make sure that my vehicle is a really good one, that it's strong enough, And then I'll find the fuel I need. This vehicle called your own sentient life and this world we live in, right? The Buddha Dharma that is transmitted already in your mind, that vehicle. That is rare. As a human, you're born with that. And to have that sense of, I've got this vehicle and I can travel anywhere now. I can go on any difficult road because this vehicle is safe. It will carry me to where I need to go. And this is, Dōgen's encouraging words in the beginning of Bendōwa. And I just need to practice. And first, I start practicing with the zazen and to establish samadhi. But that's sort of getting used to driving this vehicle. So the zazen I'm doing and the samadhi I'm developing as a gateway into this experience of realization. It's sort of my driving lessons right now. And we need to practice a lot so that we can feel like we can maneuver this vehicle on all the changing roads that we meet. But with the samadhi and the stability you can develop in that practice of zazen, that opens up that stable samadhi, that sense of concentration, alertness, and presence. A sense of presence that is stable, calm, and centered. Alert and aware. You'll be able to walk down any road. Now, that's a sort of an ultimate statement. As we're cultivating and developing our samadhi, we don't immediately test it on the most difficult situations. We just, patiently keep returning to that island of peace and wisdom. Day in, day out, moment by moment. You find yourself wet and swimming and you say, I got to get back to my island. And you know what will offer you stability. Is that samadhi mind that comes from the practice of zazen. You'll be able to listen clearly without identifying with these changing states of mind. Cultivate the mindfulness that it can accept and let go. Because you see through the illusion of self and you see these states as impermanent. So this is, the ground. This is sort of the encouragement, the initial encouragement that that Dōgen is giving us in the Bendōwa and giving his students in his first essay for his first community. This is what the message he's giving. And I think it's very intentional because you won't be able to continue on the way unless you have this vision in mind. Because you will lose your strength when you face all the obstacles that you face. That inevitably we will all face, and we do. You got to have a vision in mind. You got to have some deep faith in the inconceivable, unsurpassable, direct transmission of the complete Dharma from Buddha to Buddha, received by you as a sentient being, but yet not fully realized in your consciousness because you haven't practiced enough. So finally, last paragraph of this page, this section number 1. That will surely be enough for tonight. The concentrated endeavor of the way, the Bendōwa, the concentrated endeavor of the way I'm speaking of allows all things to come forth in enlightenment and practice. All inclusiveness with detachment, non-attachment, Passing through barrier and dropping off limitations, how could you be hindered by nodes in bamboo or knots in wood? That's the end of chapter 1. Now I'll read this again. This last paragraph. The concentrated endeavor of the way I'm speaking of allows all things to come forth in enlightenment and practice, all inclusiveness with detachment. That's such a really huge statement. Okay, this practice that we're talking about, this wholehearted way, this endeavor of the way, this zazen, this learning, this study, this path we're on, allows everything to come all inclusive, nothing excluded, all phenomena, all things, all experiences to arise, to be experienced. And he says to come forth in enlightenment and practice. All of it is nourishment for your own enlightenment and practice. Right? All things. This is an approach to all of life. All the good, all the bad, all the ugly, all the beautiful. With detachment, he says, with non-attachment. I experience the painful, I experience the pleasurable with non-attachment. It allows all things to come forth because I maintain my stable awareness, my samadhi mind. All inclusive. So this is sort of the big vision. This is how we want to practice. We want to practice, we want to realize the truth of our way, of an enlightened way, of a deep awareness of acceptance and peace, moment by moment, that can include everything you experience, everything. All inclusive. Experiencing it as enlightenment in practice, as enlightenment in practice. You know, so when we begin our way, we think of our practice as a very narrow way, very narrow. We're talking about maybe meditation, maybe study. And a lot of our experience in meditation we don't include. We think, oh, that I wasn't really practicing. The great way, what makes it great, is not that it's better than anything else, but it includes everything. As an enlightened practice, as part of your enlightened practice. So that's the vision of life we want. And it's experienced with detachment. Doesn't mean non-care. Doesn't mean indifference. It means not grasping and not rejecting, without judging of good and bad. That would be a very special way to be. And Dōgen's and all the teachers are describing this in their own poetic ways, but also in very clear ways, in direct ways. You know, not kind of being so ambiguous about it. It's like, this is what is, you know, the great way is here now. And it ultimately, you know, it should include everything as an enlightened practice. All inclusive. Dōgen emphasizes that in several places. Passing through the barrier, okay? The barrier of your discriminating mind, the barrier of your mind that picks and chooses, and dropping off limitations of, I can't deal with this situation. My mind's not, you know, evolved enough. No, you can deal with it. How could you be hindered by nodes in bamboo or knots in wood? That's a metaphor for all the kind of twists of thought we have. Nodes in the bamboo grows and it has a little nick, and then it grows and has a little like kind of bump in it. And knots in the wood, you know, when trees, like they branch out, they get knots in the wood when you cut it instead of a straight. And the knots just mean that, you know, your thought has led you in another direction. So that's the knots in the wood, is the sort of distracted, discursive thinking mind that's analyzing it, and it's leading you in a different way. Not the direct realization of the transmission of the Dharma in this very experience. All inclusive. So that was the first chapter of the Bendōwa, in the first page. And as we see, it's, introducing us to a vision and a path that is supreme. Is supreme and yet personal.
Daniel? I don't know what's coming next in the text or in the rest of Shobogenzo or in Dōgen's other writings, but at least from this opening and from what we read in the Genjo Koan, would you say that from the three aspects of practice that are usually thought of in Buddhism or like in Theravada Buddhism, like the prajna, samadhi, and sila, he really focuses on and emphasizes samadhi, or is it just a methodological or
Yeah, I think for Dōgen, the emphasis is on mindfulness, concentration, and effort. Even the endeavor is a way of talking about effort. So the Bendōwa, as an essay, he's trying to increase the effort of his students. He's giving them basically a, motivational talk right now, right? And that's what he's trying to do, is trying to show them how important Zazen is for realizing truth. And so it's kind of a pep talk, in a sense, for his monks, the first monks he had as students. And that's his first essay. So, not in all of it, because a lot of it is about, he gets very, not in the Bendōwa, but in other things. In Bendōwa is definitely the samadhi aspect of the path, but in other writings, like the Tenzo Kyokan, the Guide to the Cook, that's very much about livelihood and, effort, and samadhis are too, but it's also about intention, and view. So he brings intention and view and brings it into right livelihood. So we can see that as well. But here, for this specific endeavor, which is effort, it's developing samadhi. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the rest of this, we will talk a bit about how exactly, the samadhi develops into the great realization. It's not just like you have some calm abiding and a clarity in your meditation and you're experiencing, transmission of the Dharma, whatever that means, the great truth of reality and of emptiness. No. It's a gate. As I said, it leads you to a gate, but once you're in there, there's different efforts you need to make, and it's no longer just samadhi. But yeah, we'll get to that. Right now it's enough just to get to the gate. Any other question anyone has? One of the other things I want to emphasize here before we end is Soto Zen, which is very characterized by Dōgen and Dōgen Zen, is unique in having this strong element of faith in practice, which is sort of a kind of a paradox, because we usually want to have faith in something that will help us. But here it's a faith in your own efforts, that they will bear fruit. They will bear fruit. You know, so that's why he's telling us, you work hard enough. If you work, this is what you'll realize. Like you'll realize this. So Zen is very much, the first pillar of Zen is the great faith. And Dōgen is always starting his talks with statements of faith. And the statements of faith about, you know, all the teachers and transmission that we've been given. And that's a very Zen thing, you know. And it's not so much in, I mean, in Theravada, there's a lot of faith in Buddha, but in Zen and Mahayana, but Zen especially, and especially Dōgen Zen, it's faith that your practice and enlightenment are originally pure. You know, that you're not having to do something extraordinary here or something really heroic. You don't have to climb Everest to get to this full realization, right? So the faith is that it's really who and what you are, and Dōgen is expressing that on every page, and so we should, if there's something we can receive from that, it's that sense of faith and trust in our own truth, our own nature. I don't want to say our own self, but some people talk about it as your own true self. But I don't, that kind of mixes up terms. But thinking that you're not enlightened is just a thought. So I think we should end now with a minute to sit and then to go and continue on your own way in all the appropriate ways you manage. Let us sit quietly now in meditation for a few seconds together to finish quietly. Let's dedicate this teaching and this study and evening together to strengthening our practice, our zazen, and our awakening. That we may fulfill our bodhisattva way. And truly end dukkha and realize may all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free of suffering. So thank you everyone for your practice tonight. I hope you have a good week.